a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you. Go on alone.
Follow your dream, thy lift towards unknown. Life's but a shadow, once the brings are flown. What if the cry, your dream is not our own? Your soul knows the answer. Go on alone. Give life your heart, bless everything that's grown. Fear not the loving, all this world's your own. Make rich the soil, but once the seed is sown, seek freedom, don't linger. Go on alone. Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you. Go on alone. Go on alone. Go on alone.
Before I start, I want to say a special thank you to Dharmarajan and Dharmini for joining us this weekend. It's just a great pleasure to have them with us. They have to leave shortly after this because they are so serviceful. They're going to return to do Sunday satsang in Chennai tomorrow for those who were not able to come from Chennai to join us. Tushti and I had the pleasure to live with the two of them for a brief time in the Palo Alto community about 10 or 12 years ago. And it's just always a great joy to get back together. One of the great beauties of community living, especially within Ananda, is that in a very short time you have family everywhere, wherever you go. It's just a joy to land in any Ananda community, and I hope that you perhaps have as an aspiration the chance to live in perhaps this community or some other throughout India that we would establish, or in the US or Europe. So we're here to talk this afternoon about what discipleship means to us. And I have to begin with a preface, a bit of my own story to enable you to fully understand what it means to me, because I came to Ananda rather late. I was 53 years old, and at that time, church-going and discipleship were not even remotely on my radar screen. I considered myself a spiritual person. I had always been interested in spiritual studies. I read a lot, but I had left the church of my youth 30 years before, and I wasn't looking back with a great deal of regret. I just didn't gravitate toward the organizational aspect of it in particular. When I was doing those spiritual studies, it was primarily reading. I figured I could work my way to enlightenment, through the mind. And I read Buddhism, the I Ching. I was very interested in quantum physics and the spiritual connection. And also anything by Carlos Castaneda. I don't know if people in India know much about him, but during the hippie era in the 70s, very, very popular books. He had apprenticed himself to a medicine man in a Mexican indigenous tribe where psychotropic plants were a great part of the spiritual experience. I also had the great pleasure in the 1970s to see J. Krishnamurti in person in California a couple of times, and I resonated very deeply with what he taught. And so I felt that I was somewhat on a path, but I didn't really have one per se. And unknown to me was Paramahansa Yogananda. I had not read the autobiography of a yogi. I was not familiar with Yogananda at all. And so my coming to Ananda was very much a surprise to me in some ways. But as I will explain, it all made perfect sense. I was probably being called and didn't even realize it. Tushti and I met 33 years ago, met and married 33 years ago, long before coming to Ananda. And 15 years later, in Seattle, Washington, she came to me one evening and said, "I'd like to take a meditation class. Would you like to join me?" And to be perfectly honest, no. I wasn't interested in joining in this experiment. It sounded boring to me. I had a busy, active mind. It seemed to be serving me fairly well in my careers. And at the same time, having been married, having been a husband for 15 years, I knew it was a very good idea to say yes. And I did. So we went to this meditation class, and I had my skeptical antenna at full height, waiting to see if there was something about this that would confirm the fact that I would rather be home watching television. Well, I won't tell you that I was an instant convert, but I did keep going back. At first, like many people, like many Americans in particular, these fellows on the altar looked a little strange to me. I recognized the guy in the middle, but the others I wasn't so sure about. But in a very short period of time, I loved the teachings. I loved the people that I was meeting. I was intrigued by the concept of community, and I kept returning to the Seattle community. They have a community there for satsangs, classes, work days, for the friendships that I was developing, and maybe most of all for what I was beginning to perceive as changes in me. I resonated somewhat with what Jai was saying this morning about, not so much doubt, but just watching carefully as the teachings were taught to me, evaluating, asking lots of questions. And what I noticed right away was that people were answering those questions very thoughtfully. There wasn't any sort of dogmatic statements that were just, coming straight out of some fundamental, scripture of any sort or any background of that nature. And I appreciated that. I appreciated that my spiritual growth was going to depend on me, on my sadhana, and not on some institutional structure that I was going to have to conform to in some way. So this was, a very important part of the beginning for me. And what I would say is that as the realization of a guru-discipleship relationship came along, I really began to grow and to feel more and more a part of what the opportunity was for me, the opportunity to chip away at the limitations that I had imposed on myself. I'm still, to a great extent, somewhat compulsively analytical, and these tendencies began to break down as I began to experience a little bit more of the intuitive aspect of what was being made available to me. And through the Guru, to realize that there would be someone to ferry me across that ocean of difficulties and delusions if I would just tune in, if I would make that commitment. And so gradually I found myself doing that, and I found myself doing that because it worked. When things don't work, we question them. When things do, we move ever more deeply in that direction, and I found myself moving in that direction. Discipleship to me is just such a great opportunity to grow. And when I look back on what my life had been before, almost anyone, myself included, would have said it was a very nice life. I was reasonably successful. I had the love of my wife to share. We enjoyed where we were. We had friends, and it was a very good life. So what's the difference? 18 years later, it's primarily a difference of depth of relationships with other people and with oneself, to realize who we really are and what we are striving to become. Swami Kriyananda, for all of his splendid accomplishments, wanted to be remembered most of all for just being a good disciple. I'm so impressed by that, and I know exactly what he meant, because being a good disciple it's joyful. It enables us to overcome so many obstacles that stand in our way. Even if those obstacles aren't removed, we can approach them with a more even-minded and, as they say, cheerful attitude. What does it mean to be a good disciple? Is it like being a good auto mechanic or a good CEO of a large organization like Vodafone or Tata? It depends on the attitude, the energy, and the attunement of the individual. And as you move ever more deeply and joyfully along this path, I know that you will have that type of experience, that growth, that realization that it works. And the camaraderie of Guru Bhais, the support that we get as disciples within a community environment, within the Ananda world, is so important, because there is that recognition that we're not alone. We're not alone. We're here to help each other find God. And there's a harmony in that. I'm not going to tell you that every day is just wonderful and that everybody is wonderful all the time. We all know that we're working on our own stuff. We have, in some cases, attitudes, habits, desires, all of these things that we're striving to put behind us so that we can, as Dharmarajan said, be free, free us, you know. It's a difficult journey, but it's a wonderful journey. And I'm so glad that you're here with us, that you're going to have the opportunity to take your discipleship vows, those of you for the first time, and to renew yours, those who are taking it for any number of additional times. Swami Kriyananda to me was the ultimate example of what a good disciple is. And I don't think there are just enough words of praise, adjectives that could express that. But how do we express our gratitude for what he provided for us? To me, the one and best way is to aspire and strive to walk in his footsteps, to be good disciples also, most of all for ourselves and also for all those around us who we touch by our spiritual growth and by the joy and bliss that we're able to express. Thank you so much.